Hello there, sword friends. Today I'm going to tell you about the fancy sword rack behind me from Enso Workshop. And before I get into the rest of the video, do know that this was sent to me for free from Enso Workshop, though in this case not for a review. They sent it to me asking for some private feedback, but I happen to like it and I make YouTube videos, so that's what I'm doing. Anyway, do know that I didn't pay any money for it. If you think that makes me biased, you know at the start. So also, before I get into the review, some story time. I really like Enso Workshop. They reached out to me some time ago and offered me a stand, and I made a video about that. But also, I reached out to them and offered to purchase some sword racks when I was looking for a storage solution in my closet, armory, sword collection, holdy area. And unfortunately, it didn't work out, and I didn't end up getting anything from Enso Workshop, but I ended up going with lumber racks instead, and given the volume of swords and the size of my collection, that was a good choice. There's nothing that I believe is currently held at Enso Workshop that holds 10 to 12 swords per rung or per space, and that's more or less what I need given the size of the collection that I have. So the lumber racks were a good choice, but while I was looking for larger storage solutions, Enso Workshop popped up, and they had a sword rack that held 12 swords. It's $150, and it's linked in the description down below, as well as the video that I mentioned it in. As I was searching for storage options, I saw this, and I thought maybe this would be a good solution if I had a smaller collection, or well, that's pretty much it. If I had less stuff to store, this would certainly be a better looking solution. So anyway, they reached out to me. I'm not sure if it's after they saw my video or if they were just responding to the correspondence that I initially requested in terms of a larger storage solution, and they sent this sword rack to me to check out and provide some feedback on. And so that's what I can do. If you are a person that has a large collection to store and you want to display it proudly, then this may be an interesting thing for you. I can tell you what it works well with and what it doesn't, and where potentially Enso Workshop could make some modifications, some small tweaks that would make it work better for different types of collectors. Anyway, first off, I got it from Enso Workshop. Their packaging is really quite excellent. It's very consolidated, very sturdy, and everything is tightly wrapped. So I didn't have any unboxing, unfortunately, but their packaging is pretty solid. From a supply chain guy perspective, it's pretty well nipped and tucked. Anyway, I got the sword rack, and there are the rack components, or rather the stand pieces, which there are 2 of them, and then there are little wall bracket holders. You screw the wall bracket pieces to the stand. It comes with all the fittings and fixtures and drywall anchors as well if you need them, which is frankly very nice. So it came with those. I screwed the little wall bracket fixtures to it, took out a level, measured where I wanted it to go, and I really like the mounting solution that they come with. It's not super easy because there are brackets that you need to line up, and it can be a little bit fiddly to line up. So I took a level out, I drew where I wanted the bottom of the racks to be, then I drew a level line, I put the racks up, I leveled them out with my level, I put little markers in where the drywall anchor should go, and then I didn't end up using the drywall anchors that they came with. I prefer different screw-in drywall anchors. I've had better luck with them, like holding on and working with the types of, well, with the drywall that I use. They seem a little bit sturdier, so I used those as well as the screws that came with those other drywall anchors. Not faulting Enso Workshop's drywall anchors. I'm sure they're adequate, but I preferred something a little bit different, which are available at most hardware stores if you prefer the drywall anchor solution that I have. Either way, if you take the drywall anchors out, there's some patchwork to do, but I can't say that one is more or less invasive than the other. It's about the same amount of finish work to patch them up and take them out. Anyway, with the markers in, I put the drywall anchors in, screwed the drywall anchors in, and then screwed the stand racks to the wall. And I thought it was pretty simple. I like as well that there is a spacer piece. One, it elevates it from the wall slightly, so if you have any custom lighting or something like that, it happens to let light flow behind them a little bit more, and that's nice. 2, because there's 2 screws per wall bracket and it's held in drywall, it makes it a little bit sturdier. You don't necessarily have to find a stud, and it increases my confidence in holding it up in drywall. Given that each sword may be 3 to 4 pounds, there's a substantial amount of weight when you put 12 swords on a rack, and so putting a simple drywall anchor in wouldn't necessarily instill the most confidence in me, but 2 and effectively having 8 drywall anchors in totality holding up the swords gives me quite a bit more confidence, and it's likelihood of not falling off the wall. Anyway, I would say it's a pretty easy installation. Not as easy if there was just simply one drywall anchor, but overall not terribly complex and pretty easy to assemble and pretty self-evident in terms of what you're supposed to do. It didn't come with any instructions, but I didn't find any of them necessary. And as most of you know, I'm not particularly handy, so the fact that I could figure out what to do means that it's got to be pretty simple. Anyway, you do need a level, you do need to figure out like how to put them on the wall, but if that's within your comfort zone, then this is not unachievable. It is a little fidgety because the anchors have, or rather the pieces that you mount to the wall have a little bit of shape and dimension to them, so it's not as easy to line up as some other things might be, but I think the look and the versatility is also quite nice because you can make them 16 inches apart if you are going on studs or something like that in a US location, or you can make them very close together or very far apart if you're storing pole arms or if you're storing tanto. This storage solution can work with the type of swords that you have. I ended up going around 16 inches apart, though I didn't hit a stud on any one because I wanted it centered, or rather exactly in the place that you see it behind me. It makes for a pretty looking background, I think. Anyway, what is the stand good for? Well, actually, let's back up. Is the stand good? Yes. It's not made of a solid piece of wood, but it is. The joints are really well put together, and you wouldn't necessarily notice it without looking really, really closely. And the woodworking is really quite good. It's all very evenly done. None of the edges are sharp. Everything was dry. There was no wet lacquer, no odors or anything irritating. And from a woodworking perspective, it looks really nice. Honestly, on the wall as a rack, they make excellent stuff, and I know they can make it in a few different varieties of wood and finishes, depending on your personal preference. I really like the kind of softer mapley look with the kike that I got, the individual sword stand. I can't remember what the woodwork was, but I like the character that the wood had, and so there are options for wood with character if you are so inclined. Anyway, this variety, I believe, is right about $150. Options for painted or wood with character may change the overall cost. The sword rack itself, apart from the quality and installation, which I've hopefully told you is not terribly complicated and overall quite good, is really a little bit more suited for Japanese-style weapons or things without very long or wide crossguards. So I found that the Chinese swords that I have fit well. Sabers, if they don't have really much wider than a Suba type guard on them, fit pretty well. European swords with crossguards, though, don't necessarily fit on this particularly well. And so I think Enso Workshop could make slight modifications to thin it out so that the scabbards didn't twist so much when they mounted, and they could also space it out a little differently so that the crossguards didn't impede the movement. If you load European swords on there with large crossguards, you're going to kind of have to be strategic about how you place them in there and how you take them out, because the crossguards will interfere with each other. I guess you could alternate sides or something like that, but that still could be problematic. If you have something without a terribly wide crossguard, and it's not much wider than most Suba are on reproduction swords or antiques, then this seems to fit. But the Subas do get pretty close to one another, and in this particular solution, having 3 on a rack, it more or less does get pretty close. And so some of the Suba end up touching. They have to be kind of staggered a little bit. Sometimes the Suba touches another Saya. They do get really, really close to each other. So honestly, making it a little wider and giving a little bit more room for wider Suba would be appropriate. Most of the reproduction Suba that I have fit on here just fine. But if you had an antique with a wider Suba, then it would pretty quickly interfere with the operation of other things being placed in it. It's a little bit tightly packed together. And so I think stretching it out a little bit, giving an extra 1/4 inch on either side of where the Suba would meet, it would probably extend things about 1.5 inches out, and that might give the necessary room to fit both reproduction stuff that's available now a little bit more comfortably, as well as the stuff with a little bit larger Suba in there. The Suba don't tend to vary that much, but a very wide or large Suba could likely not fit on the stand particularly well if you had another sword with a Suba stacked next to it. Now, if you have swords without them, swords in Shirasaya, or if you have Jo or sticks or bokin or something like that without a Suba, then those would be good placeholders to give a little bit of space as well, and then you wouldn't necessarily have so much problem. But 3 Suba stacked next to each other, they get in there pretty tight. The good news is they're pretty easy to take in and out, and if you're using Japanese style stuff or stuff that is not particularly large in terms of crossguard, then it's pretty easy to take them out, and you have free access to any one of them, which is much handier than my lumber racks and much handier than other storage solutions that I've made attempts at making. I do feel like I can, one, see the pieces that are on display really well, and two, I can access them and take out any individual piece that I want and access it pretty quickly, which is something that you would think is a for granted thing, but isn't necessarily when you have swords that have 3 deep sword racks. Very easily they whack into each other, they aren't displayed particularly well, and I think this achieves a really good balance of, one, showing off the collection so that you can see all of it, and then it's on display in full character, and two, your ability to pick and choose which one you want to take to the dojo, and before you come back, and even if it's in the back, it's really easy to access, again, so long as you're using things in the Japanese style sword or Chinese sword or Filipino sword or sabers. Any of those that I can think of, military sabers for example, would probably fit in there pretty well. Things with larger cross guards, longer or wider, maybe a little bit more problematic. Also, if you have European style swords, it wasn't just the crossguard, but because they're thinner, they don't rest in the well particularly well that the sword sits in, and they kind of turn and pivot and almost lay flat a little bit. And so it's not an ideal solution for European style swords, but again, Chinese, Filipino, you get the idea. Those things fit in there, I would say, overall quite well. Anyway, I hung it up on the wall. It looks fantastic. I really like it. I'm going to be able to feature it in some videos, especially videos where I want to compare and contrast a few things. I really haven't had a disappointing sword stand from Enso Workshop. I think they make great stuff. And if you're in the mood for a sword stand, I couldn't recommend a better spot. Go check them out. They have different woodworking options and things like that. And I think sword stands are pretty cool. There's a lot of people with a lot of really cool swords, and displaying them is, well, a pain in the butt. And Enso Workshop gives you something that doesn't necessarily draw your eye away from the sword, but also has character and beauty and craftsmanship in and onto itself. And it's just made in a thought-out way that displays your collection with good woodworking, but at a price that I don't think is crazy or unreasonable. So anyway, thanks to Enso Workshop for sending me the sword stand. I appreciate it. I think it looks good. You're going to see it behind me for quite some time because I don't want to take it off the wall. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully the feedback is helpful. That's all I've got, everyone. Cheers, and thanks for watching.